me now is one of the co-authors of this bill, which could ban TikTok, Congressman Krishnamoorthi. He's a Democrat of Illinois. He serves the ranking member on, he serves on the Intelligence Select Committee and the ranking member on the China Special Committee. Congressman, first, I guess I would say it's striking that given Donald Trump's opposition to the border bill and to Ukraine funding essentially acted effectively as a veto, that him coming out to oppose this bill did nothing. It didn't seem to appreciably affect it in any way today.
Yes, you're correct. I think that, look, people saw it as a flip-flop. They knew, as I was talking to my Republican colleagues on the other side, they saw this as a transaction that he had engaged in, and it doesn't really affect the way that they would end up voting. All that being said, I think for a certain period of time, I think that the folks on the other side who were whipping the votes were monitoring closely to see what would happen, but they didn't see an appreciable change in people's position.
I want to give you some of the arguments I've heard against this bill or concerns people have expressed so you can address them because you've been a big champion of them. The first is just prioritization. I mean, I've talked to people in the last few days who are like, really, we're banning TikTok? Like, it seems like there's a lot the country needs right now. We haven't passed the Ukraine funding bill. There are enormous priorities in our country all along. Like, it's a little weird that this is so pressing. We got to ban TikTok? What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have to do the special supplemental aid to Ukraine, for instance, and we need to do it. We should have done it months ago. And I think at this point, I don't control what comes before the House, but I know that this is also important, this particular bill. It's not a ban on TikTok, but it is a forced divestiture of TikTok by ByteDance. And ByteDance, as you know, is basically controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. The editor-in-chief of ByteDance is the secretary of the CCP cell embedded at the highest echelons of the company, and he's been tasked with making sure that TikTok and all products adhere to correct political direction. And so what we are asking, and as part of this bill, are requiring, is to reduce the ownership to beneath 20%, which is the threshold, by the way, for foreign ownership in any, for instance, broadcast outlet in the United States, and making sure that we delink the Chinese Communist Party's control of TikTok from its operation.
My understanding is that everyone knows, and the CCP has said they won't allow for that divestiture, and so the inevitable result will be TikTok goes away to U.S. consumers, right? I mean, we sort of all know that's going to happen. That's what's understood to be the path forward.
No, not necessarily. You know, the economy in China is tanking right now, Chris. Xi Jinping, the paramount leader, is at pains to court foreign investment to help resuscitate the Chinese economy right now. And basically, there's been a shift in thinking about how they would view ByteDance and whether they would actually zero out that investment, which is worth billions and billions of dollars right now, even at the same time they're trying to resuscitate their economy. You know, I think that whatever happens, it's obviously up to ByteDance and it's up to Beijing. But, you know, we don't want Beijing to control this platform.
There's another argument I've seen, which is basically, look, we have foreign companies that operate in the U.S. all the time. It's a globalized capitalism, right? And we just have regulations that all companies across the board have to adhere to, right? So if you're a foreign car manufacturer and you want to sell a car here, well, then it's got to comply with whatever the NTSB and other regulators say. Like, if there are concerns about control, about data privacy, whatever, like, you could just pass some package of regulations for all social media apps and say, this is the standard. Doesn't matter if you're Instagram, TikTok, you have to abide. But that's not what we're doing. We're just going after TikTok. Why?
You can't regulate the CCP. It's one thing if there was truly a private entity that was investing here and it's not a foreign adversary-controlled entity investing here. But what we have is the CCP controlling this entity. And as a consequence, unfortunately...
What does that, let me stop you there. What does that mean? What does that mean? When you say the CCP controlling it, like, there's a lot of things that can mean. Like, there's someone sitting there with a button being like, show Chris Hayes this, or there's someone up at the top making sure, like, it cascades down. Like, just put some meat on the bones of that assertion.
Sure. There are a couple of laws in place in China. The National Security Law of 2017, which requires that any company in China must provide access to the CCP to all of its data on any user anywhere in the world, or any customer or client anywhere in the world. In addition, there's something called the 1993 company law in China, which requires that the CCP embed a cell, a party cell, at the highest ranks of the company to ultimately control the company's operations. Both of those are in effect with regard to ByteDance. Now, TikTok repeatedly has tried to assure American regulators that they can divorce themselves from ByteDance's control and ultimately the CCP's control. However, repeatedly, their representations have been false. First, they claimed that American user data would be stored here in America or in Singapore. Unfortunately, that was false. A lot of the data is stored on PRC servers, including sensitive financial data. Second, they claimed that nobody in China would be able to access this American user data. That was also proven to be false, because people in China routinely, engineers in China routinely access the data, even unbeknownst to TikTok USA employees. And then third and finally, they claimed that none of this data had ever been weaponized against Americans. That was false. The best example of this was the surveillance of American journalists using their geolocation data on TikTok, because they had revealed that the previous representations had been false. So when they keep making these false representations and not being candid, that further makes lawmakers very suspicious.
All right, Congressman Roger Krishnamoorthi, who notched a big legislative victory today. We'll see where it goes in the Senate. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Chris.